It's my nerd world, and welcome to it, Depeche Mode, the podcast. On this week's episode, why Never Let Me Go may now be my favorite song on Memento Mori. I have some second leg tour speculation, Dave's favorite album, and your listener feedback.
Hello, this is Martin Gore from Depeche Mode.
Hi, this is Dave Gahan from Depeche Mode, and you are listening to
My Nerd World.
Welcome to it. I'm your host, Jon Justice. Glad you are with another episode. This week, as always, if you want to email me, TalkShowNerd@gmail.com, or leave a comment up on YouTube. Kind of a relatively calm moment in this Memento Mori album release cycle. We did have the remixes that were released last week that I talked about on the last episode. Several of you reached out with your thoughts on them, not generating a ton of hype. Not that I expected them to. Looking for articles this week and just potential news ahead of the start of the second leg tour overseas next week. There were quite a few articles written about the release of the remixes, more so than I remember seeing in the past when remixes of the single has come out after the albums come out. And I think this is largely due to the popularity of Memento Mori. So we've got a bit of a quiet spot. I did find an interesting article that had some information, some details from previous albums, previous years that I'd never heard before that I want to share with you. But before we get to all that, I went out for my daily bike ride, and now that the weather is finally nice here in Minnesota. I was listening to the latest Rock the Cash Bar podcast. Really fun podcast, going over the history of Depeche Mode from a fan of the show. Gave me a shout-out. Thank you for that. I've read her email before on the show. But if you're looking for some more podcasts to listen to, definitely go and check out the latest Depeche Mode-focused Rock the Cash Bar podcast. But I decided on the second half of my ride that I was going to switch over and listen to some music, and kind of keeps me going. And I went on a longer ride than normal, so I put on Memento Mori. I specifically put on the second half of the album only because, as of late, I seem to be only listening to the first half of the album over and over, just because of the length of time in which I have to go and listen to music. It just hasn't given me enough time to listen to the entire record. So on my ride, I'm listening to the album, and this is probably the most obvious statement when it comes to why we're fans of Depeche Mode, but it's relative to my little story here. So the music part of it, right? The instrumentation, the way the songs sound apart from the lyrics, obviously we're fans of that. But it's the connection that this band has made with us over the years through the lyrics. I think there are plenty of other aspects as well as to why we've become such lifelong fans of this band, including the how willing the band has been throughout the years to open up the creative process with the numerous documentaries that we've had on so many of their releases, and what we know the band has gone through, and we feel like they've been living with us like they're our friends. But the lyrics and the connection that the songs make with us, right? It's at the core of being a Depeche Mode fan. And for me personally, the songs that I can connect myself to, that I can find some way to relate to, are the ones that resonate with me more. There are some songs that I have no connection to that I still enjoy, and other ones that really just speak to me, if you will, pun intended, personally. So on my ride home, and Never Let Me Go comes on. Perfect song while I'm out riding my mountain bike, right? Suddenly, I had this epiphany. I want to give you a bit of a warning, only because I know for me, and I've mentioned this before on the show, I would hate to go and ruin somebody's experience with a song. So if you are, in the case of Never Let Me Go, this is a song that you like and it has a specific connection to you, and you'd rather not have that spoiled, then I would skip ahead about 2 minutes when I talk more about the upcoming start of the second leg of the tour. So, with that being said, I'm listening to Never Let Me Go, and for whatever reason, as I'm really tuning into the lyrics, I suddenly found myself listening to the song as if Dave was speaking to me as a fan. And as I continued to listen to the lyrics, I kept that frame of mind. As if Martin wrote this song to be sung by Dave as an anthem towards us, the fans, as they enter into what I hope isn't, but, getting closer to the final act of this band. From the title alone of Never Let Me Go. I'm not going to go through all the lyrics here just for the sake of time, but if you're interested in doing this little experiment, the next time you listen to Never Let Me Go, imagine the band closing out the tour, closing out the concert with this song, and the lyrics are directly related to and are speaking specifically to you as a fan. It hit me like a ton of bricks. We will be beacons shining so bright. The emotional connection. Now, you can obviously take this song and apply it to a one-on-one relationship if you wanted to. But to listen to it from the potential of this being an anthem that Martin wrote as almost a love song to the fans and what they've given to us and the connection that we have together. Suddenly now, I find the song to be one of my favorites at the moment on the record for that reason alone. Like it just hit me like a ton of bricks. Curious if you think I'm out of my mind, if you think I'm being crazy, do you understand what I'm saying? Drop me an email, talkshownerd@gmail.com, or leave a comment up on YouTube. But next time you listen to it as if they wrote it was a song written specifically to you, the fan, or if you're watching the concert, it is the last song they play to the audience. And I think it really, really works perfectly in that context. Speaking of the tour, we know it kicks off overseas, the second leg coming up next week on Tuesday, the 16th. So I think our questions as it relates to will there be any changes in the set list will be answered. I was reading a thread on the homepage, the Halo forums on at depeche-mode.com, and I didn't grab the details specifically, but I'll just sort of give you the short version. And there were a lot of fans that were pointing to previous tours and the changes that were made during a second leg of a tour. Something that I questioned on last week's podcast, not having that knowledge right in front of me of how often has the band sort of opened up a first leg and then made a bunch of changes in the set list on the second leg. I still don't recall them ever calling a first leg warm-up shows, doing that thing with my fingers. But as was documented in the thread, there have been past tours, including the last Global Spirit tour, where on the second leg they made some pretty significant changes to the set list. I don't think that we'll see a massive change in the set design apart from a larger stage. Maybe there could be the addition of some risers for the drums and the keyboards. I thought that the stage itself was relatively flat, comparatively speaking, to the most recent tours, and with the revelation in the article that I shared last week with regard to the lighting, or maybe that was the week before, to the lighting setup for the show, saying that the stage will be bigger for the larger shows overseas. I could expect that there may be just some riser changes, but in terms of the background and the visuals, I don't expect them to change that much. But looking forward, I mean, we'll know here, like I said, in less than a week, what to expect. And it's fun for me because I haven't seen the show at all yet, and I won't be seeing it until November. So whatever I get to see is whatever I get to see. I'm excited. I'm excited either way. If you're going to the show next week, I would love to hear from you and also get some firsthand commentary. There'll be plenty of reviews, I'm sure, and videos up on YouTube that night after the show. I'm looking forward to seeing what changes are made, and I hope that they play more songs from Memento Mori. I love my idea. Man, if they closed out now that I'm thinking of Never Let Me Go in that context, to have them close the show with that would just be just incredibly epic, in my opinion. Found this rather interesting article from Far Out magazine in the UK. I'm not going to read it in its entirety. I just want to bring you sort of the relative details that I hadn't ever heard before from Dave Gahan. It chronicles Dave's overdose going back to the early 90s. And after that, after Dave describes just what a horrible experience that was in this interview, the article goes on to say it was during this tumultuous time that Depeche Mode were recording Ultra shortly after that overdose, a record that would go on to become one of Gahan's favorites, particularly because it provided him with a crossroads moment. I had never heard this before. Now, this piece of information was taken from Entertainment Weekly in 2017, so with as many albums as they've released over the course of time since 2017, I'd be interested to know if Dave still feels this way. But at the time when he was in by Entertainment Weekly, he said, "This was a weird time for me. I wasn't feeling particularly confident during the making of Ultra, and I had some rough times during it. In the middle of making it, we stopped completely, and I had to go into a treatment place to get taken care of. I also got arrested during the course of that album, busted in Los Angeles, and then I was in real trouble. That was kind of the beginning of the end for me. I was still dabbling in the idea that I could play that game, and could still continue my life, but the gig was up." The singer may have had an idea of living life out as a rock and roll tragedy. We have heard that. But his arrest would provide a cold water moment that shocked him out of his dream world and brought reality to his door. "I was actually grateful for being arrested, for the judge that promised me that I would go to prison if I didn't stay clean, because I listened to him and something clicked," he continued. "For those 2 years when we were making the album, and I had to go back and forth to court to prove to the judge that I'd stayed clean, gave me this time to suddenly realize, oh, I can do this, I can crawl my way back, I can get better, and I do want to be here." The tough time, however, would shape Gahan's view of the album. But that record is one of my favorites, Barrel of a Gun in particular, because I think Martin was also playing with this imagery as well, sort of pointing the finger at me when I performed that song. Now, it really describes the way I felt at the time, this creature that was barely existing, but somehow still thought he had it going on. He laughs. Martin was spot on with his lyrics. I mean, I don't even know if the song was written about me or for me or poking at me to say, for F's sake, get your S together. But it worked. I liked it. However, the album wasn't a usual release for a group that had toured extensively throughout their career. We didn't go on tour with that album, thank God. Thank God, Gahan continued. I think I would have died at that point. I was struggling just to sing. I couldn't stand up in front of a microphone for any longer than 10 minutes without literally lying on the floor. I was that weak. So I was allowed that time to get it together, and I'm grateful for that. I also moved to New York, and that was very cathartic for me. Being part of life again, you can't live in New York without being part of it. I had never heard that with regard to, I mean, some of that I'd heard before about Gahan's recovery, but not with his thoughts towards Ultra and specifically Barrel of a Gun. You know, I put it on sort of the list of questions that I would go and ask the band if I ever had a chance to interview them. That would be my goal, by the way. If I ever had a chance to interview Martin or Dave, it would be, I want to ask questions that nobody else has ever asked before, especially after hearing so many of the interviews and so many of the same questions. I don't blame the interviewers, because I don't think the interviewers realize who is mostly going and listening or watching those interviews. Now, sure, there are plenty of casual fans that are fans of whoever the interviewee is or interviewer is, but we all know that the majority of those interviews are getting watched by individuals like you and me who get tired of hearing the same questions over and over again. Speaking of questions, I have a lot of comments this week. TalkShowNerd@gmail.com is the email address whenever you have any questions or comments for the show, and I appreciate everybody who writes in. First, we go to Tool, 46 and 2. Loving my rainy Friday here in Indiana. Am I getting that? I'm not 100% sure. Coffee in hand. I'm going with Indy. I don't know. Indiana ID. Somebody is probably listening right now and screaming at me because I'm not seeing. Anyways, loving my rainy Friday here in ID. Coffee in hand and listening to this great episode and the past couple of podcasts. Again, relaxing. Thank you. Thank you, 46 and 2. And tell me specifically where you're from. Is it Idaho? Idaho. Indiana. Maybe it's overseas. I'm dumb. Depeche Global writes, thanks again for joining us. It was a great drink and chat. For those who would like to watch it, it can be viewed now on YouTube at the Depeche Global channel. Yeah, Rob Rome, I had a great time on the drink and chat. I put a link in the notes for this week's show. So if you're watching on YouTube or listening on YouTube, the link is available right there underneath this week's episode. If you're listening on the podcast, if you just go into the notes for the podcast, you can see the link there, or just search for Depeche Global on YouTube and you will find it there. So the Silver Fox writes in, hi, John. I have just downloaded and listened to Ghosts Again remixes. I only have two favorites, which are the David Rossi Strings, which is great, and the Rival Consoles mix, which reminds me of the good old days of the 90s with rave feel and loads of smiley face t-shirts in a sweaty, smoky rave club. Yeah, I can see that. The others I've tried to listen to, but they just seemed repetitive. It would have been great if the Messiah, Mr. Alan Wilder, would have done a mix. I hope all is well over the pond. I can't wait to see the mode at Twickenham, or Twickenham? Do you say Twickenham or Twickenham? I'm assuming you say Twickenham. Maybe it's Twickenham. On June 17th, I think it's going to be emotional. Thank you, the Silver Fox. I appreciate that. Violator90 writes, so glad I found your channel a couple of weeks ago. Have listened to all your DM content and appreciate your work and your love for Depeche Mode. Special times indeed with the amazing Memento Mori and the ongoing tour. Going to see them soon in Stockholm and in Berlin. Can't wait. And by the way, Don't Say You Love Me was my number one on Memento Mori initially. Now I can't decide if Before We Drown or Always You is my favorite. Come on, admit it. Now that I've given you the connection to Never Let Me Go being a song for the fans, it's now your favorite now. I mean, that's obvious. I'm just kidding. They are all my favorites. I am with you regarding the remixes. I'm a purist. That's a good way to put it. I was really lost on a word last week for how I describe myself as a fan. But yes, purist is a good way to word it. I'm a purist when it comes to DM as well. I prefer the album versions. Years ago, I really didn't like any remixes, and I couldn't care less. But later on, I can appreciate some remixes. I've listened to Ghosts Again remixes today. Some of them are available on YouTube. Did nothing for me except the Strings remix. There is a one who does an amazing DM remixes, and that is Dominatrix. Yep, those are really good. Great remixes, but still true to the magical DM sound. Keep up the great work. Thank you, Violator90. I appreciate that. You know, the only song, I was going to talk about this earlier in the podcast, but I forgot. The only song on the album that I don't know if difficulty is the right word. Like, I listened to it. I'm not skipping it yet. And I know it's a favorite for a lot of people, but the only song that just still is not landing for me is Wagging Tongue. And I can't quite put my finger on it. I like the instrumentation of it, but the song, I mean, speaking of having a connection, the song is just not connected with me. And I even really tried to zero in on it on my ride today. I started off listening to the first part of the album, and I skipped ahead because I wanted to get the latter half of the album in before I got back on my ride. So I got to Ghosts Again, and then I skipped forward, which is typically those chunks of songs right in there are my favorites of the album. But Wagging Tongue is just one that has not resonated with me yet, and I'm not 100% sure why. The only thing that I could possibly point to is Dave's vocals at the beginning of the song. They're off for me, not in like he's off pitch or anything, but just the tone that he puts his voice in isn't as appealing as I typically find it. That's the only thing. It just hasn't connected with me. So I'm going to give it time. There's a lot of time when songs like that come around for me. Probably one of the biggest ones, apart from Never Let Me Go that I mentioned already, was The Worst Crime from Spirit. I remember that song did nothing for me for the longest time. And then one day on the drive into work, I put it on, and for some reason, I just found this appreciation for it out of nowhere, and that's a sing-along one for me. I love that song. Earthplane UK writes, 1 or 2 mixes are okay, but the whole remix package, in my opinion, is missing a nice, chunky 12-inch extended remix with the full song and maybe some additional layers. Yeah, I agree. If you want to hear something similar to that, if you go to mynerdworld.net and go to the Depeche Mode page at mynerdworld.net, it's obviously my website, my extended mix of Ghosts Again, where I used the instrumental and the radio version and made a 6-minute cut, kind of fits that bill. I still listen to that mix quite a bit, not because I'm an egomaniac, but just because I happen to like the extended mix. And I listen to the instrumental version of Ghosts Again a lot, more so than I probably listen to any other instrumentals by. I mean, I like a lot of other instrumentals by the band, but certainly an instrumental of an album track. That one, I just absolutely love the instrumental version of Ghosts Again. Not as much as I love the single version, the regular version, but I listen to the instrumental quite a bit. Earthplane UK goes on to say the remixes are either EDM-ified with a lot of words taken out and cheesy programming and naff drums, or really abstract and ambient like the Rival Consoles one. The orchestral mix is good, but that's more like a remake, a bit underwhelming. Thank you, Earthplane UK. Appreciate that. All right, let's go to, as my word program crashes, let's go to, this is Amy F. in Birmingham, who writes this. Hope you're well. I am. I'm doing very well, actually. So, remixes. I haven't listened to all the Ghosts Again ones. I made it through the third one and decided for my anxiety levels it would be best if I took it slow. That was last week. That being said, I like the first one pretty well. Just not big on the 1,000 beats per minute techno house, whatever it is that remixes often are. There are some fabulous remixes that people have done on YouTube. Since I have been reacquainting myself with DM over the past 6 months-ish, I have been pleasantly surprised and impressed with how talented people are and how much they love this band to sit down and remix not just one song, but hours of songs. I think my favorite one that I listen to is the night driving one. Somebody in Germany driving the Autobahn late one night and has remixed some Depeche Mode songs. It's just so good. And it's not 1,000 beats per minute, so I don't want to jump out of my skin. It's very groovy, actually chill. I've listened to that many times in the past few months. I'm going to revisit the Ghosts Again remixes at some point. Maybe just taking one a day is the right approach. I've enjoyed their other official remixes that have come out in the past, some of them. I remember going to the goth industrial clubs back in the 1990s, and at some point there was a crossover between goth industrial and techno rave stuff, and I was just like, nope. Yeah, I remember that time period. I just don't like the high BPM repetitive club techno stuff. You know, I think I've said that about 10 times in this email, so what do I know? Thanks again for your shows, Amy F. Yeah, you know, it's funny, that time period, I never really got into a lot of the drum and bass or the heavy techno stuff. I did for a time get into techno, but it was usually stuff that was more aligned with Aphex Twin, Orbital, Underworld, Chemical Brothers, some, you know, those techno bands that still had some emotional resonance to the music. When we started leaning more into the drum and bass, you know, Meat Beat Manifesto, I'm kind of going over the list of those techno bands that I used to listen to a bunch. When we started getting more into the drum and bass and really repetitive stuff is when I bowed out. I remember going to several concerts. Gosh, what was the concert? I know Rob would know. The concert that they held up in Big Bear once a year. God, you know what? Hang on a second. I texted my buddy Mike, who I remember going to that show. If you remember, email me too, because I don't know. He typically takes a while to get back to me. But back during that time period, so this would have been in the 94, 95-ish, 96, maybe 96. Might have even been 97. Anyway, there was a big, huge festival up at Big Bear Lake. that featured at the time, I mean, some of the biggest, it was Chemical Brothers, it was Underworld, these ones that I just mentioned. And there was a name of it, and I remember I had a poster on my wall for crying out loud of it, and I can't remember what it was now. I know Rob would know. Rob, if you're listening, text me and tell me, because I forgot. All right. Friend of the show, Chad, writes in, just thought I'd say hi and give my thoughts on the Ghosts Again remixes. The positive, lots of vocals, varied styles. The standouts, the Misano mix, a fun thumper, will definitely be shaking my rear view and booming out my car. Rival Console, a cinematic, atmospheric approach, nice listen. The David Rossi, nice classical and string rendition. Berganists, creative minimal beat. Atmospheric, love the vocal placement. Near Misses. Miss Grit, love the stripped down but close to original take. But on a first listen, the robotic baby singing ruins it. It gets a little better when combined with Dave, but first verse was a hard listen. The Nick Kolk Void, the melody that plays over and over the beginning is annoying. Should have been the whole song. Should have had the whole song with that vibe. As a mixer, there we go. I really wanted a version by Marta. I would love to hear what she would do with these songs, unrestrained by Dave and Martin's constraints. Thanks for listening, my 2 cents. I agree with you. I was thinking quite a bit about this on my ride as well, and that is the popularity of Memento Mori and just what a crowning achievement this album is after all of these years. And I was trying, when I was on my ride thinking about this, I was struggling with whether or not I wanted to bring it up on the show, because I was thinking about the band's creative process and what we've seen, especially in the Sounds of the Universe documentaries, because that's been the one for me, because there's a couple of different, there's 2 different lengthy documentaries for that album. So when it comes to getting the backstory on albums, that one, in my opinion, is the one that we probably have the most details on, apart from Violator and the Halo book. I'm speaking specifically about the video documentaries that we can see. I mean, we have all the documentaries for the remastered versions of the album, all the way up until Exciter. We did get a documentary for Playing the Angel, but it was much shorter. It wasn't a part of the remasters. But the Sounds of the Universe one, to me, we got the most extensive background on the creation of the album. But we know that Fletch had a hand and was very much a part of the creative process for the band, and gave his input and direction on the songs, even if he wasn't directly involved in the creation of the songs themselves during the demo stage. They've mentioned this a bit, that most of these songs were being put together, and Fletch never had a chance to hear them. So, with all due respect to Andrew Fletcher, I can't help but wonder how much the lack of his input played in to the creation of this record. The fact that Martin and Dave had to sort of rediscover each other as friends because of that, and were probably working, and we've been told as much, together more so than they had on previous records, because they didn't have Fletch anymore. And then, as I've mentioned before, between Ford and Marta Solongny, that, you know, they obviously had their input as well. So getting back to Chad's comment, I would love to hear Marta do some remixes as well of the album. I mean, I think it would be great if you could hand it over to her and be like, hey, like, you know, why don't you go ahead and take Memento Mori and make any adjustments you want and put out like a complete, like, do something completely off the wall, like a complete remix top to bottom of, say, Marta or James Ford, just without the band's knowledge, saying, hey, if you 2 guys were producing the record without Martin and Dave's input, how would you go and make it sound? I think that would be, I would love to hear something like that. All right, let's go. A few more listener feedbacks this week. Patrick in Vancouver Island, Canada writes, first off, thank you for the podcast. A huge Star Wars fan here as well. Awesome. I discovered your podcast during the 4 weeks leading up to the release of Memento Mori, and I'm so grateful that I did. Oh, it's very kind of you. I've always anticipated the remixes of singles, that is, since the Shep Pettibone remix of Behind the Wheel, which is when I fell in love and became obsessed with Depeche Mode. Being someone who still goes out dancing on a regular basis, raves and clubs, the remixes do offer a more danceable take on the singles. And sometimes the remix versions become my favorite choice. Walking in My Shoes, the I can't say that. The Anna Damdinick mix, Wrong, the Scallop Funk remix, Corrupt, the Edelman remix are 3 examples. I butchered all the names of those. My apologies. The 8 remixes we received on Friday were diverse and somewhat eclectic offering. My favorites being the Bergenist Shadow mix, the Nick Kolk Void remix, Martin Herbert's Feeling remix, and the excellent techno pairing of Chris Liebling and Luke Slater. Only remix I'm not receptive to is the Masano remix. I would have loved to have had that be a Francois K mix of Ghosts again. Hopefully they're listening. Yeah, that would be rad. Final point. Memento Mori is an excellent album and in my top 5 Depeche Mode albums, which I'm shocked by, as the last 2 albums didn't captivate me as their previous albums did. I feared the same for this album. So many great tracks on this album, which makes me ponder what will the second single be, and of course, how remix-friendly will the second single be. Keep doing what you're doing. I tune in religiously. Long live Depeche Mode. Patrick Dubeck. Thank you so much, Patrick, for the kind words. I really do appreciate it. All right, and then lastly, we go to Michael from Charlotte, who comments on what to wear at a DM show. I've always, about 15 times now, worn a DM shirt. Last time, blue Doc Marten boots. Nice. I finally got my Doc Martens, by the way. That's a story for next week's podcast. Shiny silver glitter pants my ex-girlfriend made for me in 93. I still have them. Might wear them to Atlanta. I think the DM shirts to a DM show is fine. It's not like an Aerosmith shirt you got at Kohl's or Target to an Aerosmith gig. Good point. Although it does seem to suggest a DM fan hierarchy. I've been a fan since Violator, Songs of Faith and Devotion, etc. Yeah, I can see that. I never took it that way. I always thought it was cool. And this is going back to, say, the singles tour and then, before that, the devotional tour and Violator. Going to those tours and seeing somebody wearing like an official Black Celebration Tour t-shirt, I thought was awesome. Now, granted, back then, there wasn't really that much time between the release of those albums. When you actually look at the timeline, I'm shocked to see how little time went by between, say, Music for the Masses, Violator, and Songs of Faith and Devotion. Like, I was going through Monument, and I couldn't believe the short span of years that those albums came out. And it tells you just how relative time is. Because back then, it seemed like an eternity. But, like, now, it's like a year goes by like nothing. So, I was, like, stunned. So, my point being is that if you went to the World Violation show and somebody was wearing a Black Celebration t-shirt, it really wasn't all that old, right? So, I just always thought it was cool. Like, oh, wow, that's awesome. I wish I'd gone to that show. All right, back to Michael. He says, I don't know that a new fan of DM would feel comfortable approaching someone wearing an original DM concert shirt from the 80s or 90s. My ex wore an awesome blue dress, a la blue dress, to a show once. Got a few strange looks, but most fans got it. I forgot to mention in my original email my favorite stranger first listen. On my favorite stranger first listen, after Dave sings Steal My Shadows, I hear him singing and fluff my pillows on the next line. Thought that might make you laugh. See, that's the kind of thing that can get stuck in your head. Fluffs my pillows. Thank you, Michael from Charlotte. I appreciate the laugh and the email. All right. That wraps up the show for this week. Almost kept it under a half hour this time. Thank you so much for checking it out. Looking forward to next week's show. So hopefully we'll have some surprises to talk about as the second leg of the tour kicks off. And as always, I look forward to hearing from you. TalkShowNerd at gmail.com is the email address, or leave a comment up on YouTube. As always, if you want to support my nerd world, in the podcast here, and you are a reader and you enjoy reading science fiction, I hope you will treat yourself, a friend, or a family member with science fiction. That would be the series that I have written. For adults, but great for ages 11 plus. The series is called EMBARK. If you like your science fiction to be space opera themed, filled with romance and action, EMBARK is perfect for you. There's a lot of Depeche Mode references, direct and indirect, in the stories as it's set in the future, but the music of now is popular amongst the characters in the book, and the main character, Taft Guardia, the protagonist, is a massive Depeche Mode fan. So I hope you'll take the time to go and check out the series at Amazon.com or mynerdworld.net. Just search for EMBARK and Jon Justice. Follow a ragtag squadron of pilots and one reluctant hero on a journey of survival from Earth to the far reaches of space as they fight for humanity's future among the stars. Again, available on Amazon. If you are a part of Kindle Unlimited, you can read it for free in Kindle Unlimited. 7 books in all in the series, available in audiobook, ebook, paperback, and hardcover. So again, Amazon.com, search for EMBARK, Jon Justice, or go to mynerdworld.net. All right, I hope wherever you are, you're enjoying Depeche Mode. You are happy, you are healthy, and you are safe. Between now and next week, I look forward to hearing from you. I think that's all I got. Have yourself a great week. Bye.